I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and today we'd like to talk to you about nourishing the life force. You know, we believe in metaphysical philosophy that we are triune beings, that we're composed of mind, body, and spirit. And so the life force permeates all of those three aspects of our lives. And so in the next few minutes, we'd like to talk to you about the ways in which we can nourish the life force that relates to our physical bodies, our spiritual bodies, and our mental bodies. And of course, today, it seems that there are a lot of people interested in holistic health and nutrition. So the physical body we spend some time on. And of course, in our philosophy, we do place an importance on the physical aspect of our being, since it is a third of what we are. Isn't that important?
Yeah. Yes, it is very important. And for centuries, people thought if they flagellated their bodies or misused their bodies, then it was a spiritual plus. But that's not true anymore, thank goodness. And perhaps it did have a purpose in those days. Who knows? But the point is, we don't do that anymore. But many of us do not honor our physical bodies in the way that we should, by overfeeding them and not exercising our bodies and not honoring our bodies in various ways. And so when we do, then it helps. It releases our spirit, the spirit aspect of being. Don't you think so?
Absolutely, because all of those three, the mind, body, and spirit, all work together. And it's not impossible, certainly, but it's difficult when we have a limited physical body. And of course, there are many people who have natural physical limitations and genetic limitations. But what we're talking about is maximizing the health and the well-being of our physical bodies to the greatest extent that it can, so that our spiritual nature and our mental nature can mature and function, because those parts of our being are really housed in this physical body. And nutrition is really important. Exercise is important. Rest is important. All of the nutritional supplements that we talk about. And I guess we should talk a little bit about the fact that we do believe in a holistic approach. And so we believe that because of the nutritional difficulties of today's processed foods, that there is some benefit in supplements, isn't there?
Yes, I think so. And I think we've all seen this happen where people have been run down. I know a young man right now who had a lack of energy, and he started taking specific supplements, and his energy just came up. And he does rather tedious work. And so he's just a wholly different person, according to his wife. He has energy at the end of the day that he never had before for a long, long time. So we know from our own experience, because I know you and I both use supplements, and from other people, a lot of other people, that it works. And of course, anything can be overdone. So when people use too many supplements, that can be toxic to the body. And so we have to be careful and thoughtful about what we put into our bodies, whatever it is. And it's important to use wholesome food. And a lot of people have a fetish about certain foods, and they go into fads, and they use all these different diets. But just a balanced diet will keep everyone's weight average, and especially if they move around to get some exercise. And it doesn't have to be something that we dread doing. We shouldn't do things that we dread doing. It's supposed to be fun. It should be something we enjoy doing. Like if we enjoy walking, then walk. If we enjoy going to a gym, then go to a gym. And personally, I just enjoy working out in my own home, in my bedroom, and also walking. But it wouldn't matter what anyone does, would it?
No, and it can be as simple as just moving. And I think a lot of us fail to move. I know it's always interesting when you drive into, or when I drive into, any of us drive into a parking lot, how we see the people who will drive around and around to get the closest parking space. And just by parking on the farthest parking space can give us additional exercise. Or getting up and moving around our house or our apartment, or walking as you do. It doesn't have to be strenuous, but it does have to be motion.
Yes.
And we do need this motion. The other thing that we need is hydration. And I think that in today's society, we miss a lot of hydration because of the things that we drink. Many of us drinking carbonated things and prepared kinds of beverages and alcohol and some of those things. But just drinking water and just getting the kind of hydration that we need is very, very important. And as we get older, or as we exercise and deplete our physical bodies, that hydration is something that we miss a lot.
Indeed, and I get a lot of advertisements in the mail, and it's just amazing to me how many people work with just that. They teach people how to use water more holistically and to drink plenty of water, and of course to drink purified water. And there's beaucoup bottles of water sold today. I don't know how many millions or billions of bottles of water are sold. And sometimes if we can't get to pure water, then that's a good idea. But it's relatively inexpensive to have water purification systems in our homes. And there's all kinds available. And for like a couple of $100, you can get a really good system. And then we can also have that put in our refrigerators if we have running water in the refrigerator, and for the ice cubes if we use a lot of ice cubes. So we have to just be thoughtful and use our head and just think about what we're putting into our bodies, and to know that as we cleanse, then if we don't do those things, if we eat impure food or drink impure water, then it leaves toxins in our bodies, just as when we breathe impure air, it leaves toxins in our bodies. So when we avoid those toxins all that we can, then we're more clear-headed, we're happier, and then the spiritual aspect of our being is more able to be expressed and is more pronounced. And a lot of people might say, well, that's hogwash because what is, but that's not true. And we know that from counseling. We know when people get their lives straightened out and they don't have toxic thinking, they're not involved in toxic thinking, and they watch what they're eating, then it helps them a great deal toward getting their lives on the right track. So we have to be responsible for ourselves. And then if we have family, we have to be responsible for our family as long as they're in our care. And it's amazing how when children are once taught certain things, they follow through on that. I know a young man who, when he was 10 years old, loved diet drinks, and he would drink those diet cold drinks. And I told him one time, it's really bad for your body, and you want to be good in sports, you want to excel, but you're not going to be able to be your best if you keep on drinking too many of those soft drinks, because it's hard on your body. It's really difficult for your body to function with those and not drink more water. So he started drinking more water, and then a friend of his whom he admired, who was his age level, told him that an older person, had told him the same thing that I told my young friend. And so they decided they're not going to have any more diet drinks, and they're going to really limit any soft drinks. And they're not going to drink too much juice either, because they don't want that much sugar in their bodies. So they were very thoughtful about that. And he was only 10 years old. So children need to be taught. Children are carefully taught. And if they see everyone around them drinking lots of unhealthful beverages, then they're going to also. And the same is true about food. We have our idiosyncrasies about food, but we can teach younger people to value their bodies and therefore put the right food into it.
Right. And we can change our behavior all the time. That's a wonderful thing. And you touched on an important part of what we believe in metaphysics and New Thought, and that is personal responsibility. We are responsible for ourselves, and we're responsible for those around us. And so our actions really are dependent upon us. And that's not to take away from the presence and power of God, but it is to say simply that we have an obligation to meet our own needs, and we have free will and a variety of other things that allow us to do that. And so we get to choose. And so if we've made bad choices, and if we have problems with our weight and our health, or we have inactivity, or we have poor eating habits, or we have poor nutritional habits, we can change those behaviors if we decide to. And we can also encourage our children to do the same. And so if our nutritional intake is really things that we ought not to be having a lot of, we can change that, and we can change to more healthy behavior in terms of our foods. The other thing is, I think, when we're talking about foods and our physical bodies, and we kind of touched on this idea and concept, is that there's the mind, body, and spirit come together as one truth and reality of who and what we are. And so when we're eating and the food that we're taking in, we really need to do that in a thoughtful way, drawing upon the mental aspect of our being, and we need to do it in a spiritual way, drawing upon the spiritual aspect of our lives. And of course, a lot of us are familiar with saying grace or saying a blessing before meals, but most of us just do it as something to say fast so that we can get on to the food. But the concept and the idea of blessing food, or of consecrating that which is coming in and taking it in with a peaceful spirit and in a peaceful environment, can go a long way to nourishing the physical life force, the spiritual life force, and the mental life force. And I think of so many people who eat in a hurried way, or who eat when they're under stress. Or the other thing that we know in our counseling work a lot is that a lot of familial arguments and difficulties happen around the dining table. Well, here you have an environment where you're taking food into your body. You're taking food into your body at a time when you're in serious conflict, and you're creating a vibration in that experience of not blessing that food and not consecrating it to its purposes, not having your body able to assimilate it properly because of your mental state and the mental impact upon the physical body. And so this idea of blessing food, and some of our Buddhist friends are the best at this idea of contemplation and blessing and consecration of food, and where it's a more common practice in some Buddhist circles and Hindu circles, spiritual circles of the East, where there is really consecration of the food while it's being prepared, consecration of the food while it's being cooked, and then while it's being consumed, and then in a thankful spirit. And that goes a long way, doesn't it? It changes the structure of the food. It changes the structure of our being, both our physical, mental, and spiritual being, and it does truly nourish the life force.
It truly does, and there have been tests made of women who, housekeepers, who cook with love and really love what they're doing, and they cook with love because they want to nourish the family in the best way, and people who just throw things together. And when they just throw things together, it's exactly what you said, they don't get the nourishment they did. And it's been proven also that when wine has been blessed or juice for communion, then the content is really changed, truly changed, and so is food, as you just said. And my dentist was telling me just last week, but he was talking about blessing, how to keep our bodies more healthy. He's very holistic in his approach to life. And so he was saying that he knows a man who is the most gruff person he's ever seen, who doesn't ever go to church and prides himself on saying, no, I'm not part of any church. And spirituality is something that other people can figure out. I don't have time for that. But he never eats that he doesn't bless his food, puts his hands over his food and asks God to bless that food. So I think his bark is worse than his bite as to being spiritually oriented, because that man truly is. And he's always healthy, never ill, and he thinks it's because he knows it's because he blesses his food, asks God's blessing on that food before he consumes it. And if we would all do that more fully, and many of us do, and we can see a difference. And the people, and you can see in families when there's dissension within a family, then one person or more get a bad cold or the flu or something. Isn't that true? You can always see that.
That conflict comes out.
Yes.
And when we think of food and we think of dining and dinners, in the past generations, not so much today, we used to entertain. We used to invite people over to dinner. We used to go to dinners. And dinners and meals were really a time for socializing. They were a time for happiness. They were a time for sharing. They were a time for fellowship and camaraderie. And that created a whole different environment than everyone sitting at a table tense and unhappy and challenged with all the circumstances of life. And if we could get back to that peaceful aspect of eating and dining, and the peaceful aspect of interaction and fellowship, I think we'd see our life force being nourished in a totally different way.
Yes, and just stopping to ask a blessing before we eat makes all the difference in the world in our attitude toward life itself, because it calms us and causes us to be peaceful. And of course, to me, there's a life energy that comes the life force comes right through the person into the food. And that same principle works when we do spiritual healing. And as you know, we do spiritual healing at our church, certainly. And I tell anyone who is interested that they too can channel that spiritual healing, because the healing comes from God. It doesn't come from that person. It comes through the person who's channeling the healing. And so anyone can channel the healing and help others. It's the intent, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's the intent of allowing that divine force to come through and nourish our life force, which is what we're talking about
Yes.
today. And we'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue to study the ideas and concepts we're sharing.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
Before the break, we were talking about the real connectiveness of mind, body, and spirit, and the importance of the blessing. One of the things, and also spiritual healing as we practice it, and other people practice it as well. And Myrtle Fillmore, who was the co-founders of Unity, had as her foundation, when she began to work in divine healing, the idea that she needed to view her body differently than she had. When she was sick, she was a sickly person and had been sick most of her life. And she decided through prayer and meditation that the power and presence of God could bring her healing. But she knew that if that presence and power was going to come through, that her thinking had to change, her behavior had to change, and her way of life had to change. That's the mind, body, and spirit. And one of the things that she was given was that she spoke words of encouragement to her body. And she even, in her letters and her autobiography, says that she spoke words verbally every day to her infirmed parts of her body, those areas of her body which were ill, and spoke words of apology, saying that she was sorry that she had condemned those parts of her body, that she'd been negative about them, and really opening them to the presence and power of God and allowing the life force to be nourished. And out of that process, she was healed. So, but that really comes into the aspect of our spiritual and mental nature. So Myrtle was using her mental and spiritual nature to direct a healing in her physical body. And so she was nourishing the life force at all three levels, wasn't she?
Yes, and she succeeded too, in a most admirable way. And so I think when we live a balanced life, then we are balanced in mind, body, and spirit, and we use our bodies to the greatest advantage, and gently and tenderly, and then in our minds too, that we don't harass our minds and we don't push ourselves in that way mentally. Because when we're balanced in mind, body, and spirit, we know that certain things are going to happen that aren't pleasant, that we find difficult to cope with. They're going to happen in other people's lives who are precious to us, and also in our own lives. But as we know these things are going to happen, it's the way we accept them and the way we go on then, because we know that life is change. Life is change, and life is a series of choices. So we have the choice of going from one situation to another situation, and we can create that situation, whatever we wish to create, we can. And so a lot of people give up with this in discouragement because they think, well, everything's against me and I don't know what to do, I don't know where to turn. But just a few words from a counselor, or a few words from someone who is altruistically just looking out for the other person, can make all the difference in the world. And of course, we always talk about meditation, and to me, meditation is the key. And you and I do a lot of counseling, and I tell people and I instruct them on meditation if they've not meditated before. And I do past life therapy sessions, and I always tell people who call for a session that they might be able to just save their money, because if they just meditate, they'll get answers to those questions they want. Because I know that the truth is within, and we just have to bring it forth. So whatever questions we want to ask during our meditation, those answers will be forthcoming. We just have to honor our own intuition, honor our own ability to bring through the God aspect of ourselves, the spiritual aspect of being. And when we do, we're never disappointed because we always get what we need.
That meditation as an aspect of nourishing the life force is probably the most dominant, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I mean, when we talk about life force and nourishing our life force, there are many facets which we've touched upon, but the two dominant ones are food and nutrition on the physical side, and meditation on the mental and the spiritual side. And meditation, of course, allows us to center ourselves, and it goes right to the heart of the aspect that we haven't talked a lot about, which is the mental aspect of our being. But to nourish our mental being and to nourish our mental life force, we really need to be in a peaceful place, in a peaceful state of consciousness. And yet, just as you said, we're all going to be faced with challenges and difficulties. We're all going to be faced with difficulties in relationships and in our jobs, and the stress that we have in our work, and financial challenges, and the illness and loss of loved ones. All of those things are a part of the natural process of life. And so every one of those things can throw us off center from a mental standpoint. And we need to have a peaceful state of consciousness and a peaceful spiritual reality and a peaceful vibration in our physical body in order to claim the reality of our health in mind, body, and spirit. But so often our minds are going, and especially in today's environment, I think, as I counsel people, and I'm sure as you do too, the one consistent problem that people have is mental.
Yeah.
It is the guilt, it is the negativity, it's the hurts that they can't let go of, it's the past memories, it's the things that go on in their mind, it's the fear of the future and fear of the present moment or the present circumstance or challenge. And so all of that just cuts off the nourishment. It cuts off the nourishment to our mental process, and we really spend most of our life just like Job did in that whirlwind experience. You know, so many of us have this whirlwind going on inside of us all the time, and our minds never really calm down. And then, of course, with drugs and alcohol and all of the other kinds of things that people go to in order to relieve this pain. And one of the things that we have a lot of problems with in today's environment is a number of people who can't sleep because their mind is never at rest and never at peace. And so we look to chemicals to solve that problem, when in fact those chemicals just make the problem worse. And it gets worse, and our minds just go down, and our physical bodies. And so what we really need is the ability to calm our minds, to center ourselves in the presence and power of God. And certainly meditation is one of the things that allows us to do that. And I think, too, before we get away and time gets away from us, we need to point out to people, especially those who haven't been exposed to meditation, that when we say meditation, and don't think of it as being synonymous with prayer, because for so many Westerners, especially people from traditional faith organizations, and this is not to be negative, but so many people in the Western faith tradition, in the Christian faith tradition, use prayer as a way of pleading or begging or supplication, and so prayer then is not meditation. Prayer then is, as we say so often, and everyone else does, is dialogue. It's talking to God. But meditation is simply being, isn't it? It's simply coming into a quiet place of communion with the presence and the power, with the life force, with the divine force. And so sometimes when we talk to people about meditation, people say, "Oh, well, I've been in the church for years, and I pray all the time, but nothing ever happens." Well, of course, the prayers are simply another way of making the problem worse, because the prayers become a pleading for something, and there's never any peace. And negativity is expressed in the prayers. And of course, the presence and the power of God isn't able to flow, and those individuals, for the most part, are not open to the presence and power of God anyway, although they believe they are. And so they come into great conflict. And so we know a lot of people who spend hours in prayer and feel so terrible and feel so separated from God and so alienated. And that's a sad situation. And that has to do with prayer. We could do a program on positive prayer one day, but meditation is really a different aspect completely. Isn't it?
Yes, it is. And as to prayer, if we just utter prayers of gratitude instead of supplication, and just to be grateful and to thank God for the good, and when we're praying for our family and friends, to pray for their good health, to pray for in a positive way, just to always be positive in our expression. And then in meditation, it's just simply being quiet. And we speak often here of deep breathing, but to me, that's a requisite, because when we do the deep breathing, we relax our bodies, and then our minds are then more free to just be instead of in turmoil. So to deep breathe, to me, the important aspect is to just practice deep breathing, inhaling deeply through the nostrils and then hold it for a moment and then exhale slowly through our mouth. And when we do that over and over a few times, then we're relaxed and we can forget that we're doing that, but we'll continue deep breathing. And then just offer a brief prayer of thanksgiving and then listen for answers, and prayer and meditation is listening. And then if we have questions we want to ask, just ask very brief, simple questions. And the first thing that comes to mind, accept that that's the answer. But don't doubt. But just know that your intuition is really on target, and you're hearing from this spiritual aspect of being what you need to hear, what you've asked for. And so we have to trust our own intuition. But if we do those things, then we are so refreshed after a brief meditation. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. We're refreshed, and we have the answers that we need, and we're nourishing the life force and the reality. And it's important for us to really remind our viewers and listeners that this idea of pleading to God for something, that Scripture is true when it says God knows our need. We don't have to tell him. God either knows or he doesn't know, and God knows everything.
Exactly.
So God already knows what you need.
Yeah.
God already knows what your family needs and what your loved ones need. And the verbalization of it is simply to be affirmative about it and affirm the power and presence of God in the midst of the circumstance, not to beg God to change his mind or her mind.
Yes.
But so often we have that problem because people think that through prayer we need to plead, and if we plead enough and if we do enough, then God's going to find favor with us. And that goes back to this old idea that somehow we're separated from God and we have to do something to earn God's approval. God loves every one of us the same always, and that never changes. But our behavior brings into our life experience a series of events that have cause and effect, and that has to do with us. It doesn't have to do with God. It has to do with the universal laws of cause and effect. And so those come about because of what we create for ourselves, and the presence and power of God is where we go in that meditation. And that real simple act of just deep breathing can do a lot, can't it? And remember, when we're stressed, and when we're in pain, when we're suffering, when we're unhappy, if we just would pause and take a few deep breaths, what a wonderful thing that would do.
It makes all the difference in the world. And of course, there's an aspect of God within each living person, each person. And there's an aspect of God within each discarnate person too, because that aspect of being never dies. The spirit and soul never dies. So God is within. And so as we're quiet in our meditation, then we're more attuned to that divine aspect of being through our own higher self into the spirit of God, God in being, and Creator God. And so if we look at it that way, to me, it's very comforting, because it's like we look to our parents when we're young, or whoever is responsible for us, the adults who are responsible for us, we look to them for our well-being, and rightly so. And so then as we look to God in that same way, it's not as a punishing father, it's not as any punitive way in any way. It's of being grateful for what is, and grateful for being part of Creator God, and grateful that our own thoughts and words and actions make a difference in the world, because it always does.
Absolutely, and we're grateful for the ability that we have to present these ideas and concepts and help you to understand the fact that nourishing the life force is a simple process, but it's a dynamic process that may require a change in the things that you do, the way that you think, and the way that you behave. And we hope that you found this information useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.